You've been lied to about mental illness and it's costing lives. We're told to just be positive, to get over it, but that's not how the brain works. Today, I'm pulling back the curtain on the truth most people, and even some doctors won't talk about. Because understanding the science isn't just power, it's freedom. This isn't about weakness, it's about fighting back. If we can conquer heart disease and cancer, we can conquer the stigma too. So let's rewrite the narrative, take our minds seriously, and start a movement that changes how the world sees mental health forever. The science we ignore explain how mental illness isn't all in your head. It's biological, chemical, and environmental. Break down how the brain's wiring and hormones actually affect thoughts, mood, and behavior. You know, we love to talk about mental health like it's some kind of mysterious emotional fog. Like if someone's anxious or depressed, they just need to think positive or snap out of it. But that's not how it works. Mental illness isn't a choice, and it's definitely not a character flaw. It's biology, it's chemistry, it's the brain doing what it's wired to do, sometimes just not in the way we want it to. When we talk about depression, for example, we're not just talking about sadness. We're talking about real, measurable changes in the brain, in neurotransmitters like serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine that literally shape how we feel, think, and respond to the world. Anxiety, that's the body's threat system running on overdrive, flooding you with cortisol even when there's no danger in sight. Schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, OCD, all these conditions have neurological fingerprints. They're not imaginary. They're not weakness, they're science, and yet, for decades, we've separated mental health from physical health, as if the brain isn't part of the body. We treat someone with a heart problem as a patient, but someone with depression as a problem. That division is one of the biggest lies we've been told. The brain is an organ. When it malfunctions, it deserves the same compassion and care as any other organ that's struggling to do its job. Think about it. If your pancreas stops producing insulin, we call it diabetes. No one says, hey, just stop having diabetes. But when your brain's chemistry is off balance, suddenly it's mind over matter. That mindset has to change. Because when we understand that mental illness is rooted in real biology, we start to remove shame from the conversation. We replace judgment with empathy and silence with science. Because the truth is, once we start treating the brain like the vital, living organ it is, we don't just heal individuals. We heal the stigma. The cultural lie expose how society still treats mental illness as weakness or drama, and how that false belief keeps millions silent, suffering, and untreated. Here's the thing, culture shapes how we see everything, especially mental health. From the time we're kids, most of us are taught to be strong, don't cry, don't talk about your problems. We grow up believing that showing emotion is weakness, that struggling means you've somehow failed at life. And that's the lie so many of us carry into adulthood, that mental illness is a flaw in character, not a condition that needs care. Every culture has its version of that message. Some say just pray more, others say work harder, and some don't say anything at all, they just stay silent. But silence is powerful. It teaches people to hide, to fake smiles, to pretend they're okay while they're falling apart inside. And when enough people do that, the lie becomes the norm. Society stops seeing the human being behind the illness and starts seeing labels: crazy, unstable, attention-seeking. Those words sting, they isolate, they keep people from getting help when they need it most. The truth is, mental illness doesn't care about status, race, gender, or income. It's not a sign of weakness, it's part of being human. But when culture tells us otherwise, it creates a system where people suffer in silence, even in the most developed societies. We've built a world where someone can post about a broken arm and get sympathy, but post about depression and get judgment. That's how deep the cultural conditioning runs, and it doesn't just hurt individuals, it weakens communities. When we can't talk openly about our pain, we lose connection, we lose understanding, we lose each other. The result, a generation that knows more about mental illness than ever before, yet still feels too ashamed to talk about it. So, if we want to change the conversation around mental health, we have to challenge the cultural lie head on. Strength isn't pretending everything's fine. Strength is saying, I'm struggling and I'm still showing up. Because when honesty replaces shame, healing finally begins. Stigma doesn't start with hate. It starts with misunderstanding. Someone says they're depressed, and instead of empathy, they get advice like just cheer up. Or it could be worse. The message isn't meant to hurt, but it does, because what that person hears is, your pain isn't valid. That's where the stigma cycle begins. Shame creeps in, people stop talking, and silence becomes the new normal. The silence is dangerous. When people hide their struggles, they also hide their stories, and without stories, we lose awareness. We stop seeing the real faces of mental illness, our friends, coworkers, teachers, even family. Instead, stereotypes take their place: the unstable person, the drama queen, the loner. Those labels don't just distort reality, they feed fear, and fear fuels more stigma. Now think about what happens next. Because of that stigma, people avoid seeking help. They convince themselves it's not serious enough, or that they'll be judged. By the time they finally reach out, the illness has often progressed, sometimes to a point of crisis. Society then looks at that crisis and says, see, that's what mental illness looks like. And the cycle starts all over again: shame, silence, misunderstanding, repeat. Breaking that cycle requires something simple but incredibly brave: speaking up. Every time someone shares their truth, whether it's through a post, a conversation, or even therapy, it chips away at the walls stigma built. It tells others, you're not alone and you're not broken. That's how awareness grows, and awareness leads to change. We saw it with cancer, HIV, addiction. Once people started telling their stories, the stigma began to crumble. It's not about forcing everyone to share their trauma. It's about creating a world where they feel safe if they choose to. A world where silence isn't the default and empathy replaces ignorance. Because the more light we shine on the truth, the less power stigma has to hide in the dark. And that's how we end the cycle, not with judgment, but with understanding. Stigma doesn't start with hate. It starts with misunderstanding. Someone says they're depressed, and instead of empathy, they get advice like just cheer up, or it could be worse. The message isn't meant to hurt, but it does. Because what that person hears is, your pain isn't valid. That's where the stigma cycle begins. Shame creeps in, people stop talking, and silence becomes the new normal. The silence is dangerous. When people hide their struggles, they also hide their stories, and without stories, we lose awareness. We stop seeing the real faces of mental illness, our friends, coworkers, teachers, even family. Instead, stereotypes take their place: the unstable person, the drama queen, the loner. Those labels don't just distort reality, they feed fear, and fear fuels more stigma. Now, think about what happens next. Because of that stigma, people avoid seeking help. They convince themselves it's not serious enough, or that they'll be judged. By the time they finally reach out, the illness has often progressed, sometimes to a point of crisis. Society then looks at that crisis and says, see, that's what mental illness looks like. And the cycle starts all over again: shame, silence, misunderstanding, repeat. Breaking that cycle requires something simple but incredibly brave: speaking up. Every time someone shares their truth, whether it's through a post, a conversation, or even therapy, It chips away at the walls stigma built. It tells others you're not alone and you're not broken. That's how awareness grows, and awareness leads to change. We saw it with cancer, HIV, addiction. Once people started telling their stories, the stigma began to crumble. It's not about forcing everyone to share their trauma. It's about creating a world where they feel safe if they choose to. A world where silence isn't the default and empathy replaces ignorance, because the more light we shine on the truth, the less power stigma has to hide in the dark. And that's how we end the cycle, not with judgment, but with understanding. The doctor's perspective address how even healthcare professionals can unintentionally reinforce stigma, and what needs to change inside the medical system to truly help patients heal. Let's be honest, even inside the medical world, stigma still lives. Doctors, nurses, therapists, we're trained to heal, to fix, to find the cause and offer a cure. But when it comes to mental health, the system often fails the very people it's meant to protect. Why? Because for decades, the medical field has treated the brain differently from every other organ in the body. Physical illness gets protocol, mental illness gets hesitation. You walk into an ER with chest pain, and the team moves instantly oxygen, blood tests, specialists. But walk in with a panic attack, and you might be told to just breathe. Maybe handed a brochure, not because healthcare workers don't care, but because the system wasn't built for this kind of pain. It's built for what it can see, not what it can't. That gap between physical and mental care has left millions of people feeling unseen and unheard. And here's the hard truth. Stigma doesn't just live outside hospitals, it thrives inside them. Some professionals still see mental illness as something patients should manage better. Or they hesitate to ask about emotions because it feels too personal or not their job. But when we avoid those conversations, patients learn to hide what hurts most. They show up with physical symptoms, headaches, fatigue, stomach pain, when what they really need is someone to ask, "Are you okay emotionally?" The shift begins when we, as a healthcare community, start treating mental health like the medical issue it truly is. When doctors ask about stress and sleep the same way they ask about blood pressure, when therapy referrals are as normal as prescribing antibiotics, when compassion becomes a standard of care, not an exception, because the truth is, stigma loses power when professionals lead with understanding. When medicine acknowledges that healing the mind is just as important as healing the body, everything changes for patients, for families, and for the future of healthcare. The day we treat mental illness with the same urgency as a broken bone is the day we truly start to heal. The power of open conversation demonstrates how talking openly about mental health saves lives. From celebrities to everyday heroes, and why vulnerability is the new strength. One of the most powerful tools we have against mental illness isn't found in a prescription bottle or a therapy office, it's conversation. Talking openly about what we're going through can be uncomfortable, yes, but it's also transformative. Because every time someone breaks the silence, they give others permission to do the same, and that's how movements start, not with policy or publicity, but with people choosing honesty over fear. The truth is, silence has never saved anyone. It only strengthens the stigma that keeps us sick. But when someone opens up, when they say, "Hey, I'm not okay right now," it flips the script. Suddenly, mental illness isn't this distant, mysterious thing anymore. It's human, it's relatable, it's us. And once we see that, empathy replaces judgment, understanding replaces avoidance. That's the power of speaking out loud. We've seen this shift happen before. Remember when no one talked about cancer, addiction, or PTSD? They were whispered about, hidden away. But as people started telling their stories, society learned to care, to research, to treat, to fight. The same thing can happen with mental health if we keep the conversation going, Now, I'm not saying you have to share your deepest pain on social media or in front of a crowd. Sometimes the most meaningful conversation happens between two people, a friend checking in, a parent listening without judgment, a colleague saying, "I get it." That's how we build safety, one interaction at a time, and it's not just about talking, it's about listening, really listening. Because when someone opens up, they don't need instant advice, they need presence. They need to feel seen, not fixed. That kind of listening can literally save a life. So let's normalize real conversations about mental health, not once a year on Awareness Day, but every day. Because the more we talk, the less power stigma has to silence us. Open conversations don't just change minds, they save them. The call to conquer end with an inspiring challenge. We've conquered disease before. Now it's time to conquer stigma. Encourage viewers to take action, share stories, and redefine what mental health really means. We've come a long way in understanding mental health, but knowledge alone isn't enough. Action is what changes everything. We've conquered diseases that once terrified the world. We've found cures, built vaccines, and rewritten the rules of medicine. Now it's time to take that same determination and apply it to mental health, to conquer stigma the same way we've conquered illness. Because stigma is a disease too. It spreads through silence, thrives on misinformation, and kills through shame. And the antidote isn't complicated. It's courage, compassion, and connection. Conquering stigma starts small. It's how we talk to our friends when they're struggling, how we speak to ourselves when we're hurting, how we respond when someone says, "I'm not okay." It's refusing to use mental illness as a punchline, refusing to minimize what we don't understand. Every small act of kindness, every moment of empathy, every voice that says, "You're not alone," chips away at the walls that stigma built. This isn't just about awareness anymore, it's about transformation. Because awareness without action is just noise. We have to be willing to challenge outdated beliefs, call out harmful stereotypes, and advocate for mental health care that's accessible, affordable, and stigma-free. We owe that not just to those who are suffering, but to ourselves, because mental health affects every one of us, directly or indirectly. It's part of being human, and here's the powerful truth. When we choose to confront stigma instead of avoiding it, we take back control. We prove that our struggles don't define us, our response to them does. The future we build depends on the conversations we're willing to start and the compassion we're willing to show. So let's stop waiting for someone else to fix it. Let's be the generation that treats mental health like the priority it deserves to be. Because conquering stigma isn't just possible, it's necessary, and the battle starts with us. The truth is, mental illness isn't the enemy, silence is. For too long, stigma has convinced people to hide their pain, to fight battles no one else can see. But that ends here, because once we start speaking, once we start listening, the walls begin to fall. The science is real, the pain is real, and so is the hope. Together, we can create a world where mental health is treated with the same respect as physical health. Let's end the silence, break the stigma, and remind everyone watching, healing starts when we stop hiding.